Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure that you'll agree that she deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Tania Anderson.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. It's good to be with you.
And it's great to meet you in person after we've been exchanging information. Uh,
Right.
you've lived such a fascinating life as an international flight attendant. During your decades of experience, you've traveled to 79 countries. You've been based in five. After graduating from American University in Washington with a degree in political science and international studies, how appropriate, hired as an international flight attendant by the iconic Pan American Airlines,
Love that.
which set her on a course to explore the world's continents. And by the way, I stayed at the Pan American Hotel once out at I think that's out at LaGuardia Airport.
Yes.
And so I got a chance to tour the one of their model jets sitting in the backyard there. So it's pretty interesting. You've been awarded all sorts of cool stuff. Civilian Medal by the Air Force for outstanding achievement with the Civilian Reserve Air Fleet charters. Also, a purser on flights for the U.S. Press Corps with Andrews Air Force Base paired with Air Force One. And
You
you
know,
shared some of her favorite stories in her memoir on Butterfly's Wings, which chronicles some of her enticing, often bizarre adventures this career afforded her. Included meeting a host of famous people, including five American presidents. And
right.
she's now one of our fellow hosts on the Brushwood Media Network with the Global Gratitude Show. So we welcome Tanya Anderson for her first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dave. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, we're delighted to get a chance to chat with you and to share things. So, as you know, we're going to ask you three questions. The first one is personal to me. I'm a lifetime anti-smoker. I suffered through the period when I flew frequently when I was corporate attorney while smoking was still permitted on commercial flights. Share with our audience how you work to end that disgusting practice.
well, well, to start out, my beloved father, aunt, and favorite godmother all died as a result of smoking or secondhand smoke. I
Mm.
flew for Pan American World Airways, as you mentioned, as a purser in the late 80s when smoking was still allowed in planes, restaurants, and other public areas. I'll never forget the first time I saw a billboard in LA that said, "The smoke does not know where the non smoking area is." It was not
Absolutely.
only health, sorry?
I said, absolutely. I was
Yeah.
there.
It was not only unhealthy for everyone, but super dangerous on a plane flying at 35,000 feet. After numerous announcements in different languages, being on Pan Am because we're always going abroad, to advise passengers of no smoking while standing, they would still gather at the back of the Boeing 747 and puff away. I would be up in first class as the purser carving the Chateaubriand, doing the tableside service, right? And my antennas would start to quiver, and I would look way at the back of the 747 and I would see it getting smoky. And I'd say to one of the flight attendants, "Take over for me." I would go all the way to the back of the plane and see them. And when they saw me coming, they would take the butt and rub it out in the indoor outdoor carpet. Well, that's obviously not safe. And if it was the second time I caught them, I'd say, "Come here, I have something to show you." And I would take them to the window and I'd say, "Can you see those white caps in the Atlantic Ocean below us? We're flying at 35,000 feet, about 6 miles up. If you start a fire and we must ditch in the ocean, the odds are not on our side." And then they'll get the big eye look like, okay, you know what I mean? It's too bad you have to take it to that level, but people are, they're sneaky and they misbehave. And so one of my first experiences volunteering as a lobbyist on Capitol Hill was in 1990 when Pan Am's Flight Attendant Union, IUFA, International Union of Flight Attendants, taught us how to lobby. So we went and listened to a congressional subcommittee speak about stop ban smoking in airline cabins. We listened to the testimony from flight attendants from other airlines, and then the senior flight attendants from Pan Am testified. Afterwards, a beefy 747 Pan Am pilot. You got to keep in mind we're all very opinionated because we've been traveling a lot, and all that. And he barked at me, said, "So you think a bunch of effing flight attendants, Pan Am flight attendants, are going to get the public to stop smoking and get the feds to get them to stop smoking?" And even though I'm nearly 6 feet tall, I just kind of shrank back a little bit, and I said, "Yes." But guess who won that round? I mean, we were thrilled when the legislation got passed.
Absolutely. And I had some involvement down here in Houston, Texas. I went to law school. And while I was in law school, I was a volunteer with TAPS, Texans Against Public Smoking,
Oh,
which was
okay.
affiliated with GASP, Group Against Smoking in Public. And between your efforts and our efforts, I think we've accomplished something amazing because over 50% of the adult male population smoked by the mid 1950s,
Mm.
and we've made such strides. It always amazes me when I talk to somebody who smokes today because we've not just stopped people smoking in public, we've stopped people from the dangerous habit of smoking. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Though, unfortunately, a lot of people transitioned into vaping. And from what I
Yes.
understand, especially for young people, vaping is just as hazardous. Good news is whether it's smoke or vaping, you can't do it on an airplane today.
Right, there you go.
So we're definitely on the same page there. So you've been involved in improving the world in other ways. Tell us about some of your other efforts to improve life for others.
Well, I always look for what binds humankind and what brings us together. And building houses for Habitat for Humanity was a golden experience. Something magical happens on every build. The volunteers, including supervisors who are contractors themselves, guide and direct the newbies. And you're surrounded by volunteers who strive for the same thing that you do, is like to make a difference. And you bond so quickly because the mission, quote unquote, is the same. What a powerful gift to give to a loving home to the needy. And volunteers feel so empowered because they're learning new skills like using a saw to slice roof tiles. I was on the Hollywood for Habitat one where we built 26 homes in a giant lot donated by the city of LA. So it was Long Beach. You'll remember actress Bo Derek. She worked on the same
Yes.
home that I did. And she not only was wonderful and a diligent worker, but she brought her sister too, which I thought was charming for days. Later, I went over to Madagascar for 2 weeks, which was an extraordinary experience. And the entire time, everything went smoothly. We stayed in a Malagasy home, which was actually a house that was already built for somebody new, but the volunteers have to come in and build another house. And then you can see kind of it goes, and then the recipients move into the place where we were staying, and so we just took our sleeping bags and we're sleeping on the floor. The Malagasys prepared meals for us, and they also washed our laundry in the rushing river nearby. Later, we explored their stunning country, and I've always referred to it as the best kind of diplomacy there is. What is better than building a house for a deserving family? They call it a handout, not a handout, but a hand up. Also, when I worked for a wealthy chief in Nigeria, Chief Kabo, I visited two leper shelters because I was hoping to talk him into investing for them to just have basic needs, but unfortunately, I wasn't successful. But I'd like to get back to the power of everyday citizens lobbying on Capitol Hill as volunteers, which is also very empowering. The NGO CARE had annual conferences in DC where they would divide us into states and give us bios of our senators and congressmen along with the pointers of how you interact with them and engage them to listen to your concerns about certain issues. Most of CARE's ongoing issues had to do with getting to the source of the world's poverty and provide solutions. I have lobbied for the Education for All Act, the Child Marriage Act, the Violence Against Women Act, and the Youth Promise Act and the American Disabilities Act. It was founded by or co-founded by Paul Hearn, another attorney. You probably know that name. And I met him actually at a bar in Northern Virginia. Super man, and really good. Really made a difference.
Well, I remember the early days. Texas was ahead of the United States with regard to helping. And here it was called the Committee for Employment of the Handicapped. And in the early 1980s, I was a corporate representative to that group and actually
Wow.
escorted a person who had CP and was using a wheelchair. And that was quite an experience for me to transport her from Houston to Austin for the conference and help her get around and stuff like
Yes.
that. And I remember being there one time when Greg Abbott, Governor Greg Abbott, who was an attorney at the time, that later governor, uh,
Right.
wheeled himself up onto stage and he had already, before he became well known as a judge and then later as a politician, he got injured while he was running. A tree
Oh
hit him
no. Uh-huh.
and caused him to be a paraplegic, which is why he was in a wheelchair. So it was very interesting to attend that conference, but it showed the opportunities that we can make available for people with disabilities. And of course, when the Americans with Disability Act was put into effect, I was one of the early people involved in educating people on it during 92 to 94. So it
Good for
was
you.
it's a pretty interesting area. Unfortunately, it does complicate things for employers, and there's a lot of issues involved in it, but. Overall, I think it's a very positive thing because we were not utilizing people who, but for some type of reasonable accommodation, could do the job. And
Right.
it made I think it was a great leap forward for our country. Um, and like I said, there's some application issues there that I tend to work with different employers, but overall, I think it's been very positive. And we wanted to switch and not go without having you tell us all about, or at least give us some hints about On the Wings of Butterflies. And I know there's too many stories to go through the whole list, but share a couple of them with us. We need a little bit of sex appeal here or something.
Okay, okay. Well, meeting Mother Teresa, which was a total, I'm not even Catholic, I'm Episcopalian, was a total surprise. So we were in Calcutta, and she was supposed to be in Rome with the Pope, and I just wanted to go and see how she ran her shelter. She runs a whole number of them. She's
Hmm.
got a leper shelter, she's got two orphan shelters, and so anyway, the newspaper had said she was in Rome with the Pope, but I just wanted to go anyway. So I got there, and I hear these Americans in the foyer where she lived, her house, which is really large, uh, and they're whispering, and I said, "What's going on, you guys?" And they said, "Well, Mother Teresa canceled her trip to Rome. She'll be out in about 20 minutes." I couldn't believe it, and I just so it was just so amazing. So I went upstairs and I looked around, and then we just formed this impromptu line, and she came out of her quarters. She was very petite, and she was quite ill actually. She's 4'9". She had malaria. She had congestive heart failure. She had bad arthritis. You could see in her hands. And there was something. Oh, she had broken her collarbone. She had four things going on. She was like 83 years old, but she still came out to greet everybody. And I purposely stood at the back because I saw her bless each person as she's going down the line. And so she motioned for me to lean over, okay, and I had to bend down a bit far, and she put both her hands on my head, and when she did, it was like a gentle waterfall coming from heaven, straight down through her into me. It was absolutely remarkable. And I fished around in my pocket afterwards, and I gave her a C note, $100 bill, and then she reached in her sorry, which is actually made by her lepers, and she handed me a whole fistful of them, and I brought them back to the States and gave everyone away except I kept one for myself, and then it's in my purse to this day. That was 1996 when I met her. But I also met Nelson Mandela very briefly at the Congressional Gold Medal ceremony in 1998. And I wrangled an invitation from the only congressman that I knew personally, Congressman Jerry Kletzka from Wisconsin. And he said, "Tanya, you're in luck because my wife Bonnie and I can't make it. So I'm going to give you two invites." So, but I ended up going by myself, and I was sitting right in the Capitol Rotunda, and it was remarkable. I got there early, and here come all these people. Here come the Kennedys, all all the Congress people and senators, and then Bono came in, who was going to meet later on, and just all these people. It was just remarkable. And I'm not saying a word; I'm just watching. And then in the invitation, it said you're not allowed to take any pictures. Absolutely no flash photography. But I saw the stiff suit starting to, so I thought I can do it with the best of them. So I sucked in my stomach, did the crab dance, and I was up under that dais in a nanosecond. And I said, "God bless you, President Mandela, Madiba. God bless you, God bless you." And he leaned down and shook my hand, and he's standing right next to President Clinton, and it was otherworldly. And then somebody behind me speaking Xhosa, his language, that it sounds like a bunch of clicks. That got his attention, but that's cool because I had my moments. So I was singing his name all the way back home to Northern Virginia. I was so excited. Oh, Lord. And then I met Obama when he was senator, and I knew he was a man of destiny. That was 2006. And CARE had him as one of their speakers, along with actually Meg Ryan and some other people one year at their annual conference at George Washington University. And so somebody said something about the state Illinois is going to have a breakfast, but it was just a continental breakfast. So I just gave an Illinois address for a friend of mine who lives in Chicago, and I was like a rat on the ship. I just went in and talked to him for a few minutes and had a picture taken, and that's one of the pictures on the front of my book. So had a lot of golden experiences, but Mother Nature like gives you. I mean, the Brits have this wonderful expression: "Fortune favors the brave," and when you keep going after something, sooner or later you're going to get something. The universe is going to give you a really good opportunity because you're just trying so much.
Well, it sounds very exciting. Yes, I had a chance to meet Bono in Washington, D.C. He was speaking at a conference on trying to help solve the problem of poverty in the world, and well, apparently one of his concerns. And it is interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't get to South Africa until a few years ago, and of
Uh-huh.
course, both he and Bishop Tutu had already passed away, but I did get to tour his house, uh, and that was pretty interesting. And saw the giant statue of him in Johannesburg. But he certainly made a great impression. I remember in high school reading the book "Cry the Beloved Country," which is a real fascinating expose of what it was like to
Mm.
live in apartheid South Africa. And in touring there, the hardship that Mandela experienced is hard for people to imagine. To see somebody as president of a significant country, and what happened to him during the 1980s, to go from a prison cell in 1989 to being president of the country, I think by 1994, is a very extraordinary story. And I think a lot of lesser people might not have made it through that struggle.
I completely agree. As a matter of fact, I was fortunate because a friend of mine who's now deceased, he was a curator of aeronautics at National Air and Space Museum, Ron Davies, and he edited my book. And in the chapter where I talk about that day meeting Mandela, he said that how Mandela was remarkable. He went and avoided a lot of bloodshed by just talking to all the tribes. And then at his inaugural, he invited his jailers. Now, talk about redemption. That's remarkable. I mean, like you say, it's otherworldly. To be abused and eating horrible food and having those conditions you speak of, and then you're 27 years like that, and then you become president, and so gracious. I mean, when Clinton handed him the Congressional Gold Medal, solid gold. He looked at it. He was radiant. This is when I see that men are radiant. He's absolutely radiant. And then he handed it at Congress Lady Maxine Waters to hold for safekeeping, and everybody laughed in the rotunda. It's just amazing that the power also of being inside the Capitol Rotunda where JFK's body lay and stayed after he was assassinated in '63. It's kind of an otherworldly experience. Even though I'm from DC and I grew up in the world of politics, but it's really quite a feeling.
Well, it's amazing. And as you know, Tanya, we try and keep these short so that people will actually listen to all the interesting stuff you have to say. So, how can our audience get more information about you, your book, and your radio program?
Okay, well, my website is easy for about my book. It's just TaniaAnderson.vip. TaniaAnderson.vip. And I guess I'm your fellow in like host on Brushwood Network, which is fantastic. I'm so excited about that. And my show is the Global Gratitude Show with Tania Anderson. That can be you can listen to it on Mondays, every Monday at 1300 East Coast time, and that is via the Brushwood Media app.
Sounds like a winner. This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube at Dr. Dave Saves America. And thanks, Tanya, for being our guest today.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your feedback and concerns. And remember, you can always like, comment, and subscribe right below. And if you've got any ideas for a specific episode or topic, be sure to let us know in the comments. And we generally not only read all the comments, we try and take action based on them. And you can also see us at our website, drdavesavesamerica.com.